Unemployed and Afraid acknowledges the traditional owners of the land we have recorded this episode on and of the land where you, the listener, are tuning in from. We would like to pay our respects to elders past, present, and extend our respect to any First Nations, Aboriginal, and Torres Strait Islander people joining us today, acknowledging that this always was and always will be Aboriginal land. Welcome to Unemployed and Afraid, a podcast that explores the glorious mess of building your own business with the people doing it. I'm your host and fellow business builder, Kim Curtin. Thank you for being here. Let's get into some good, honest, small business chat. Happy new episode, Business Builder. I am clearly very pumped up for it, naturally, and just love sharing the incredible stories of brave humans out on their own, backing themselves into creating a business they love. And before we get into all that goodness, can I just say the biggest thank you to the human behind Expat Estate, who wrote me this review recently. And they said, "What an incredible podcast, a true game changer. Starting a new business venture can be at times exhilarating and fulfilling, and at other times overwhelming and exhausting. This podcast puts everything in perspective and makes you realize that you are not alone. I can wholeheartedly recommend it. Thank you, Kim, for all that you share and the wonderful energy that you bring." Oh my God, that is an outstanding thing to read. Thank you for sharing how you feel about the pod on Apple Podcasts through this review, because not only does it give me the biggest pump up and encouragement to keep creating this for you, it also happens to tell Apple and other listeners that they should absolutely tune in, which is priceless for me. So yes to everything you just said in that, particularly about the combination of exhilarating, fulfilling, and overwhelming and exhausting all at once. That is absolutely what we're here for, to encourage you that it is absolutely worth to keep going. So thank you. So many feels. Building your own business comes in a lot of forms. We all know this. And today we get to hear about the incredible business of freelancing with my guest, Alex of Alex Mills Social. And we're going to chat about the breadth of unique challenges and learnings that freelancing brings. Because when you're in business and you're responsible for keeping that pipeline building while you're doing the do, there is quite a bit of balance. In this episode, you'll hear us chat about the value of time as a freelancer or any type of business owner when it comes to subjective networking, how to identify your transferrable skills, vanity metrics, and quote unquote, trying to win at the socials, getting ghosted when pitching yourself. Oh my God, do I know that feel? The importance of time spent on both promoting yourself and learning. And this business building story comes with some nerding out about threads, which I was pretty pumped to do, and a lot of excellent social media tips to boot. So if you're looking for some business solidarity and inspiration, you are in the right place. Let's get into it. I'm chatting with Alex Mills, the creator behind Alex Mills Social, where he works to empower brands to create inspirational online social media content via social media strategy, content production, and authentic partnerships with creators. Alex is what we call a unicorn strategist, a producer, creative, accomplished digital marketing leader, and global brand consultant with a track record of delivering award-winning work for some of the biggest brands on the planet, like Optus, Adobe, Spotify, and more, before taking the leap into an independent consultant / freelance / solopreneur operation. Today, he's consulting for small businesses who need social media support but aren't seeking an agency partner, and agencies who want a senior social media expert on a more casually retained basis. You could say he's embracing the modern day labor movement in becoming his own business. Freelancing is a powerful business model and one I can't wait to explore more with you, Alex. Welcome to Unemployed and Afraid.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's been a long time coming. We have known each other for quite some time and been in the outer circles of LinkedIn world, just getting around each other's posts for a while. So I've been looking forward to connecting with you.
Yeah, no, it's been a very long time that we've been connected in our past lives.
Yes, and you never know where those connections are going to come back in, and I'm really glad ours has in this way. Getting into our first question, I'd love to know, how would your best friend describe you?
I was thinking long and hard about this, and then I ended up just asking my fiance, because I guess she's my best friend, and she was just like, "You are authentic, you're loyal, and you're giving." That was her thing, and yeah, that the authenticity is really crucial for me. What you see is what you get with me. I've worked in a lot of different environments, whether that's in your startup world, whether it's in your big corporate world. but I've always wanted to make sure that my personality shines through in everything I do. So I think that would be the most accurate description.
Is there any better way to be? I often find myself trying to like mute or pull back on the pull back on the authenticity a little bit sometimes when it gets a little bit too chaotic and you think, just go for it. You got to do us, right?
And I guess the loyal thing, I've been keeping up with my football team who have been in the lower ends of the football pyramid, and I'm still trying to watch the games at 2 a.m, watching Ipswich Town. And there's loyalty and commitment there. So
You've got to do it. You've got to do it. So let's go back a little bit and we can go back as far as you like. Before going out on your own, before creating this space for yourself, who were you?
yeah, I grew up in a town called Ipswich. For any of your listeners who don't know, it's a lovely small town on the east coast of England, about an hour outside of London, famous for a wonderful football club, almost so famous for Ed Sheeran, who sponsors the football club. He put us on the map a little bit, not quite Ryan Reynolds and Rob McElhenney for Wrexham, similar things to that. And it's a great part of the world, but it's a fairly sleepy part of the world. And I was a big music fan, actually. Growing up, I wanted to be a rock star, basically. I was a big punk and emo fan who wanted to be in a band or wanted to write for a magazine like a Kerrang or something like that. I just wanted to be involved in the music industry. So actually, the first half of my career was in that world. So when I finished uni and did everything, moved to the Big Smoke, I was interning at a record label and then ended up getting a job as an online downloads administrator coordinator, which this was essentially the start of content marketing. So I was managing streaming services and download services, firstly at a white label perspective, but then moving to Microsoft and managing a lot of their download services. And so it's the early days of content marketing at the time, a lot of advertorials and BuzzFeed and that sort of stuff. Social media was fairly new. And content here was programming online music stores across different devices. A lot of transferable skills in terms of relationship building with record labels, in terms of data analysis, crafting short form copy in that environment. So I really enjoyed it. But I was doing that for a few years, and I could see the evolution of that side of things shift less from the human side and more towards programming and coding. That's when algorithms are taking over. That's where personalization is taking over. So I saw there was a bit of a ceiling there, and either I'd shift into something like PR or I'd have to go into different forms of content marketing. So that's when I started exploring wider social media roles, video production, storytelling for brands, essentially. And that essentially saw me leave the music industry, go into something different. And I went to a telco. This is in London at the time, so I'm getting a little bit more experienced. I'm no longer doing band on the side with your day job. And that environment was quite corporate and not really me. And I was starting to experience a little bit of itching for something new. So I gave it a good year in that sort of world, got the experience I needed. And then I was at a bit of a crossroads, had friends that had done the working holiday in Australia, and they were all saying, you should come to Australia. The digital marketing world is booming over here. You could use that to get back into a creative field that you enjoy doing. So I did it, packed up, went with nothing more than a laptop and a suitcase, came to Australia thinking, let's try and get some sort of marketing role that's a little bit more me. That could be at a record label, that could be at a broadcast or whatever it is. Let's figure it out. If it doesn't work, go traveling, enjoy it, come back refreshed and revigorated. Within 6 months, I'm working at creative agencies, sponsored, got a really big social circle, and found my element in Australia. And nearly 8 years on, here I am, owning my own business and engaged. So yeah, that's, I suppose, the start of what happened. But when I started in Australia, going to these creative agency roles, and so that was new. Usually, you get people that started agencies and then move in-house, and I did the opposite. I went in-house and then went to agencies. And so I was at various different agencies. First role was looking after Optus, which was a dream, taking that telco experience and then looking after, they just secured the broadcast rights for the Premier League. So I was doing that. And then I was doing a lot of their music content. So content creation for Snapchat, management of content across all of their main social platforms, going to Rio for the Olympics and creating content on the fly there. It was a phenomenal role. Moved to another agency after that to look after Adobe. Was there for about 4 years, started off as a couple of small little projects and then grew from a team of 3 or 4 to a team of 20, multi-million-dollar account, influencer campaigns across all of Asia, award-winning work. So this is now we're talking about 5 or 6 years here. I'm thinking to myself, I've loved the kind of privilege of representing these colossal enterprise brands, but it's one account for a long time. And I wanted to start delving into different, helping out different kind of businesses, because that entrepreneurial side of me was really wanting to explore working with different types of companies, whether that's small local businesses, whether that's, different industries. So I took one more agency role where I was looking after more clients than I can remember, but the big guns being your Spotify's, your Lenovo's, your Fujifilms, a lot of new business pitching as well. And within that time, that gave me the breadth of work that I felt I needed to become a consultant. And then it also made me realize that the agency environment, the only way you can really continue to progress is being less hands-on in the kind of execution and more in the running of the agency. And that just wasn't really something I was that interested in. I love creating content. I love working with businesses, being hands-on. I just want to help people and not be as involved in the boardroom behind the scenes stuff. By becoming an independent consultant, yes, there is that element in terms of managing my own business, but that's it. That's what I'm doing. So I'm free to take on all sorts of different projects, whether that's helping a small local nonprofit that has limited resources and I can help them in an agreement that works for both of us, or whatever it is. I just felt that I needed to take that chance and see how it works.
Yeah, I really resonate with what you say there about looking at the environment you were in and thinking, this has been fantastic. And then, but what other roles, where does this go? And I think it's quite a admirable space to be able to say, I know this isn't for me, because it's very hard. So I think a lot of people would find this in any kind of corporate environment, not just necessarily a high energy agency environment or a media or a marketing, that kind of, because that certainly does come with its own level of energy. But most corporate roles, they're so full and they're exciting in ways and all consuming in the personalities you get to work with and the social aspect of it and the big brands you get to work with that are sometimes a little bit your ego enjoys it. You're like, cool, I get to work with some cool stuff. And then with so much fullness of a role, it's hard to think about what you actually like to do and want to do because there's so much coming at you all the time. And so I think that your ability to be able to step back a little bit and go, I see where this is going. I see that I'm going to end up in maybe a role like that or that, and I can feel that it's not the right space. For me, it's not exactly what I want to do. I think that's what a lot of people have a struggle with, is being able to make that decision because you can't see what comes next. And consulting is a scary space to go in. Freelancing is a scary space to go in, but also really soul enriching. And I think anyone who's listening is thinking about going into it and trying to create a freelance model or is in the thick of it. Yes, it is. It's really hard. It's really scary, but just getting yourself out there to start is so admirable. So many people can't get there because the job's so full. You always get distracted with the job.
Yeah, and I think particularly for me, when you think of a freelance social media person, people usually think, okay, so they're a digital nomad in Bali doing Facebook ads and community management for businesses on enough money to just pay their hostel fees. Like when it comes to freelancing in this world, usually there is square pegs for square holes. You're a freelance graphic designer. You've got a clear kind of like box that you're in. You're a freelance creative director. Agencies bring you in for pitches, whatever. For me, I was a bit like, at first I was like, I don't really know what it is yet because I do social media strategy. When I was in the agency environment, I was the client service person. So you're a bit of a hybrid of everything. Video production is something I learned on a job when there were smaller budgets. And I was like, okay, I just need a DOP and a sound person. For any of you listeners, like a videographer, a camera operator, and a sound person. I can be the director in that regard. So I got more into that. Influencer stuff is, again, just not so much learned it on the job, but that was just something I ended up doing. Like I didn't really have this clear, obvious thing at the time. So that was quite a scary thing. But I think the other thing that really motivated me was I look back at kind of what I enjoy about doing this work. I realized every campaign, every case study I did, it was almost going back to my music thing of looking back on it and being like, this is a song I wrote, or this was a record I made. I could look back at a campaign for Adobe and be like, I'm really proud of that. It's like my sophomore work. And I just knew that route of going further up the ladder meant that there wouldn't be that for me anymore. It would just be boardroom charts and numbers and stuff like that, which is just not the best use of my ability on both sides of the coin.
Totally understand that. And you touched on something really interesting there. And I want to get into making the decision to go freelance and then how you got started. So I do want to come back to that. But you talk about your skill set and making it easily understandable to somebody who's going to hire you. And I think as someone who has a multi-set of skills, also many of us do, it is quite difficult to get yourself to be marketable. What was that experience like for you once you got out there and got going? How do you find promoting yourself and what you do?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think one of the things that really helped me start, I suppose, getting some momentum in the freelance world was I was working with my performance coach, and we'll probably get into that later, but he was wanting me to think about what my mission is and what my purpose is, and not wanting to go down the cliched motivational kind of world. That actually really helped me, because at first I was like, I'm a freelancer that can help people with a bit of social media strategy, but I can also do content creation, but I can also do a bit of influencer marketing. Suddenly I took a step back and thought, what is like a succinct mission or purpose? So I can say, I do X. I help businesses by doing Y. And so that's where it was. Okay, Alex Mills Social is my business, and that entails social media strategy, that entails content creation, that entails influencer marketing. And that just suddenly made it a nice little package that can be there. So that at the time I was like, I do these three things, but it felt hard for me to provide a succinct explanation of that. So when it comes to social media strategy, I'll work with businesses to flesh out a strategy that they could execute themselves. So they might sit there and be, I know I want to be on social, but I'm too busy running the business, but I need help with content. Don't have much budget. Don't want to hire anyone. What can I do? I'll sit down with them for a day and we'll be like, okay, what resources do you have? You're good on Canva, brilliant. Or you've got a camera phone, you can start filming yourself talking about your business and your product. But I'll work with them to flesh out a strategy that works for them based on the resources they have, based on the time they have. And then I'm like, cool, I can help you. Let's do a check-in call every few weeks to check you're on track. Do we want to change any of these content pillars that aren't working for you? Do you want me to start helping you create some of that? Or that's what I think you could be doing to market your business in that time. Or it can be a company that I need help with creating a video for a campaign, or I need help creating X number of videos for Instagram or TikTok. Can you come and do a day shoot? And yep, cool, we'll do that day shoot. You've got these X amount of videos. Or they want to work with influencers for a specific seasonal campaign. And I'll say, cool, all right, here's what I reckon we'll do. And I can execute it, or I can help you execute it, whatever it is. So there's that flexibility.
And there's something so special about that when your day doesn't always look the same. So take me back to that decision-making moment to go out on your own and the idea started to seed. What were some of the barriers for you for getting going in those early stages? Where did you start? Where did it grow?
I think when the seed was first planted, the barriers were that I don't know what box to fit in compared to strategist, compared to designer, compared to video producer, whatever it is. And then there was that lack of enough wider experience. It was almost, I was looking after very big brands, which in the agency world, they'd be worth 5 or 6 kind of other clients because it was different business units. So I was almost like working for those companies without actually working for them. So I knew that I needed 1 or 2 more roles to diversify my client mix, to be able to, in different working environments, to do that. The other big environment was just, it sounds silly to look back on it now, but like the admin, the tax, understanding GST, things like that. I was just like, oh God, like that, for some reason, that was such a big barrier, which is so funny to think back now. I let it run on autopilot so easily. I just set up a bank account, one saving account, every dollar I make, put a third of that into that account, GST, put it in there, and just don't touch that, and have a little Google sheet for everything else, get a good accountant, easy. But that was such a big thing for me at the time. I was so used to just getting my pay packet, knowing what I've got, and that's it.
I couldn't relate anymore, honestly. It really is a challenge. And yeah, I actually just switched my accounting softwares providers recently. And so I'm going through that pain again, just trying to figure out, oh my God, how do I create a system for this that makes sense? And it can be very labor intensive, learning to put in all your expenses. And the people who do this and people who enjoy reconciling and all of that sort of stuff, hats off to you, because I put it off like crazy. And I'm like, I don't want to know what's going on here. But once you do start to get a handle on it, it is also very empowering. I totally relate that it can be a bit of a barrier because you've got things you want to do, get yourself out there, promote yourself, do the work. But then there is the admin. It's just a very real part of it, its own kind of learning curve.
100%. But it was also one thing I do. I'm looking up right now at my whiteboard, which includes my to-do list, but it also includes a little bit of things to celebrate. And I remember one of my biggest wins early on was just getting my BAS statement done on time. I was so happy about that. Feels so minor now, but I was just like, yes, I've done my BAS early, 100%, it's done, and loved overcoming that hurdle.
Yeah, I hear it's, and then you think back to working not in a freelance or a small business environment and being like, not even knowing what a BAS is.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just
Exactly.
like, and then all of a sudden you're celebrating it. It is a real journey doing this. I'm really interested in this sort of aspect of freelancing because I think we all have a real challenge with it. And my listeners will know, and you and I have discussed, I do a little bit of freelancing myself as I'm building up my businesses as well. And it's so my freelance business is a business, the podcast is the business. I have other business interests. So building it in together. But in particular, when you are building out that freelance model, figuring out how to price yourself was a big challenge that I faced, and I know a lot of other people have. What was that like for you? What challenged you through that process? How did you work through it?
To be honest, it's something I still face. I suppose the thing that's helped me a lot, particularly, is once I started freelancing, initially the thinking was, okay, I'm going to be helping out all of these small businesses. Thinking the kind of businesses I help, for context, could be anything from local health clinics to camera rental product companies to small e-commerce brands to baby formula companies, local community businesses with small budgets. But I am also part-time working for agencies. That gives me a really healthy balance because number one, it's like I still get exposure to the big brands. I'm still working and learning off incredibly smart strategists and creatives and that sort of thing. I'm still in that environment, just not full time. That gives me the freedom to work with my local businesses. Also means that having that agency income, there's that security and there's that stability because you know that it's a month-long project for X amount of days, or it's at the moment I am on a fairly medium to long-term retainer. That is there and I know that's coming in. So that gives me a little bit of freedom accordingly. So what I do when it comes to pricing is I have a rough idea in my head of an hourly rate. But then if I know I'm going to be working, if I work with someone for a one-off project for 1 day, 2 days, then you know there's elements of it that goes up. If I know that it's going to be over a medium to long-term thing, there's economies of scale there where that day rate, I don't really like to use the term day rate, it's more like a project fee, but you have to use that for the basis to estimate what that's going to be. That can go down. Yeah, I think there's elements of that as well as, say, extra work. I think that some of the challenges are, particularly in my area where it's, I want you to do a social content calendar. Cool. I can cost that up, but I need to see the brief first because I don't know what level of, I suppose, extra research I'm going to have to do on this category or this area before I even get into filming anything or designing anything. So it is still something that I'm learning, but I would say that for anyone out there, it's depending on if it's, suppose, how much you want the work, particularly if I know it's for a more purpose-driven brand, then I know that I'm going to try and make some discounting there. If you think that's going to lead to more work coming in, then you can start to be like, yeah, economies of scale. I think that's generally it.
Yeah, it's always a little bit of a journey, isn't it? Figuring that out. Have you ever had, and you most certainly don't need to name drop here, but have you ever had a challenging, I'll call it a sales moment, when you have to deliver someone your rates for things and how much things cost? And particularly if there's someone who maybe hasn't worked with humans who work in strategy and creative and spend a lot of time developing these skill sets, and then people see the cost of engaging someone for that. Has there ever been any challenge around that?
I'll be brutally honest, there's never been a challenge other than just getting ghosted. Just send the price and then say, look forward to hearing from you. Don't hear anything. Send a follow-up a bit later saying, would you like to lock this in? And then that's it. That's the biggest challenge. And so I'm either just, look, I'm going to get the work or I'm going to get ghosted. And I think the good thing about building relationship with agencies in that regard is it does mean that I can be a little bit more like this is my cost to a small business. And if they just ghost me entirely, then I'm just a bit like, fine, like I'll get over it.
Absolutely. The ghosting, it does really crack me up because it happens so often just in so many things we do when you're out on your own, whether it's a PR pitch or pitching to a sponsor on my behalf, or pitching for new work somewhere. Just the crickets sometimes that you receive, and when nothing comes back, it's just, somehow it hurts more than a no.
Yeah, it's a strange one for me because, when it's a small business, you're thinking, oh, surely, like, I could understand it if it was big corporate and time poor. Yeah, I guess everyone's time poor. I try and think of it of the case of they're just like, okay, we're not going to go forward. Oh, I need to move on to this next house. I'm sure in 99% of cases they're not deliberately being rude. But at the same time, if you send a quick follow-up and, hey, I'd much rather they just say, hey, look, like, we actually just have other priorities right now, but thank you. Or they'll just say, look, we just don't have the money. Because then I could say, okay, cool. If you don't have the money for that, then let's figure out kind of something that can work. If this 15 photos and 3 videos or whatever it is that we're talking about here is too much, then what if we just do 1 video and a couple of like infographics designed in Canva, like something like that. But hey.
Yeah, it just takes a little bit of time and energy, doesn't it, just to get back. But I hear you, and I like the optimism and the positivity around it's not us, it's them.
Yeah.
As a solopreneur, one of my favorite titles, which I think we all should embrace a lot more of, and I'll put that on my LinkedIn soon. How do you stay motivated and focused, and particularly with the balance of work you have on versus future work that you need to be out there and finding as well?
Yeah, I think that going back to that mission really helps, because particularly every time I'm creating content to market myself, I do a lot of content on Instagram and on TikTok. And that also gives me something to do in my downtime. So I will be scripting and I'll be doing a lot of that, and I'll be shooting that in the days when I'm not working. And at first I was very hung up on views and metrics. And the thing I say to anyone who's getting started in social, what would you rather create a reel that gets 6,000 views of just randoms that enjoy it? Or would you rather create a reel that's 50 views and that's 2 business leads? We all know the answer to that. So getting into that mindset of, I want to be creating content to showcase my expertise and add value to people's feed. And because I enjoy the process of creating, that was a really key thing to help me get motivated in between that moments. I think having my performance coach is really helpful as well. He helps with things like, shout out to Chris Robson. I'm gonna shout him out. He helps with imposter syndrome, feelings of doubts. He'll just sit there and be like, remind me why you're good at what you do. He provides that support. When you no longer have a line manager, that's where investing in a coach can be really good. And we're on a similar level. He used to sing in a metal band back in the UK. He was also a solopreneur. He was a personal trainer before he went into this. So having a coach that's on the same level as you was really helpful. And then the other thing that I do in that downtime is learning material. There's always more things that you can be learning. So I have a list of things where I'm like, okay, if what do I need to really elevate my offering? Are there some other like filmmaking tips and techniques that I could do just to elevate that? I am someone that is more a strategy and creative person. Maybe I'll do a little bit more background in the paid media side of things. There's always more things you can be doing on Udemy, on Skillshare. For anyone who's doing social media that needs a little bit more guidance, Meta Blueprint, there's hours of free training in there. So I always have a bit of a list of things to upskill that I can do in the days when I'm not booked on a project. And that just keeps me going.
Meta Blueprint. I'm just going to note that one down because I don't think I've even heard of that before. I didn't even know it was there.
Honestly, it's secret weapon. Like for me, especially because, again, as you go up the chain, particularly in social media, you might no longer be in Facebook Ads Manager setting up campaigns because your client service, your strategy, and you delegate that to someone. Meta Ad Manager changes every 6 months. So once you're out of it for 6 months, like you go back in, you're like, I have no idea what's going on here. So I even go over it for things that I know or used to do just to refresh myself. It's like a muscle that you just want to keep exercising. So yeah, most of the platforms have great learning material out there. So it really just helps you strengthen your knowledge, go into areas that maybe you hadn't done before. And it helps keep you on top of the latest platform updates. And I think that's the other thing, because when I was in the agency world, I'm so busy on the projects that I'm not necessarily the first. As soon as Threads went out, I was like, I'm going in, I'm spending hours getting involved and immersing myself in the Threads world. And I've really enjoyed it because I loved Twitter when I was in the UK. And I know that Twitter's not really as popular in Australia, so I really missed that. So it was great to be able to do that and just spend a few hours going in. Cool. All right. I'm going to create a video about my opinion. I'm going to go and research what brands I think are doing a really good job in this space. And I may not have had the capacity to have done that in a full-time job. So I think that's the other thing as well that I've found really keeps me going.
Can we nerd out a little bit on Threads? Because I, like you, I went in hard and fast. I love the written word and I love audio. They're my two favorite mediums. I know the value of video so highly for everything that we do in any kind of business, but my loves are the written word and audio. And I just fell in so deeply in love with Threads, but it was like the quickest relationship ever because I went in really hard and fast and then I got distracted and pulled out and I haven't been able to get back into it. So let me nerd out with you a little bit about Threads because I feel like there's a few of us. I saw some stats recently that 70% of the people that went in have actually pulled back and aren't as active. What are you seeing in that space? What are you finding interesting about it?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think the thing that I loved about Threads compared to, say, other of the newer platforms that emerged in the last year and a half, so Be Real, Blue Sky, that sort of thing, Mastodon and all of those things. With Threads, it's connected to your Instagram already. So you don't have to think, okay, we're going to start Be Real. Spoiler, I don't think any brand needs to bother being on Be Real. I think it's a colossal waste of your time.
Agreed.
But like, you know, with Threads, you just had your ready-made audience there, and it's just a free hit to try stuff out. I saw some people around being like, we need to have a clear point of view on Threads and a strategy. My stance is, no, just go nuts and try stuff out. And if it tanks, who cares? This is just a free hit. That was my main thing I kept saying. It's a free hit. So I did not expect the drop off to be as high as it was, though, to be honest, because I felt particularly in this market, we were lacking that kind of short form written interaction. When I came to Australia, Twitter was already not really there. Part of me thinks that maybe it's the time difference to the rest of the world. Part of me thinks we're such a beautiful country. It's a much more visual world and that sort of thing. I'm not sure. There's a number of reasons, but as soon as I came to Australia, Twitter just felt dead to me. And Threads, I felt, could be filling a clear gap. So I still think it has a future. I think the other thing is maybe some people in this market, the way Threads algorithm works in terms of more suggestions rather than what you want to follow is potentially what's putting people off. I think that if they maybe address some of the earlier barriers of discoverability of content by subjects and that sort of thing, we might see a few more people flock. But yeah, I am a little bit surprised at how much has dropped, but I'm positive that there is a future for it. It might just be in certain niche areas. Like I'm still using it a lot because I'm following the World Cup over here in Australia and New Zealand. And there's a lot of great content still in that sort of area. So it might just become more that news, journalism, sport and entertainment sphere as opposed to much else. We'll see.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think I agree with everything you just said and can see it falling into that place where it's that instant. I'd probably add to that politics, media, sport, news, but also quick-wittedness, just quick in the moment things that are really relevant. I feel as though where it ended for me and where it changed for me, and I don't know whether or not other people feel this, as soon as I started to see the conversational tone or the cultural tone of Threads shift to how to win at Threads, I felt really disappointed. We all of a sudden started to see 5 great tips for winning on Threads and a lot of vanity metrics being shouted. We just ran the first competition on Threads and now we've got 40,000 followers. And I'm like, this has literally ruined it for me. Like I couldn't care less how many followers I'm gaining on Threads. The conversation was really rich and really pure. And I don't know if this is just the case with social media in general, because we're all brands trying to get traction in spaces. We use these free platforms to help ourselves grow. Everything becomes about trying to win in the platform instead of just being in the platform and sharing it authentically. It's a real line and that ruined it for me. I was like, please stop telling me how to win and telling me I have to have a strategy on this damn platform. I'm just out here making jokes.
Exactly. And some of the businesses I help, the most rewarding, to an extent, the most rewarding, I obviously enjoy the challenge of growth and that. But there are some businesses that are like, look, the business and the operating model we're doing is fine. We're just not that good we don't have much on social media. We don't have sales targets. We don't have KPIs, but we do need a profile to house information about us. And that's where you can be a little bit more like, we're just going to get the best content that can add the most value, that looks really nice. We don't have to worry about being active on there all the time. We just want this to be an information hub. And it goes back to the role of, say, Threads or Twitter. For some businesses, I always say just try and do one or two platforms and do it well rather than spread yourself thin. No one's going to be sat there thinking, oh, I really wish that this brand was on Snapchat and this brand was on Twitch. If you can do it well, brilliant. But if not, don't bother. But then equally, if you can set a clear expectation of what a channel is for, you could have a Twitter page or a Threads page that is just for somewhere where you can just post a weekly blog post and you set the expectation that's what it's for, then that's fine too. Social media shouldn't be about winning. It's about connection. It's about adding value to people's lives. And I think I really try and take that pressure off when working with businesses because it's so subjective. People could look at a brand and think that their content isn't very good because they don't like it. Everyone has an opinion on social because we all have an Instagram page and a Facebook page. But you might look at a brand and think, I don't think their content's very good. But you don't know what happens behind the scenes. They could be in an industry that's heavily regulated. That means that they can only do a certain amount of content. There might be tons of stakeholders that's weighing in, and you've got a poor team of 2 social media managers or even one that's not only managing community management, content creation, but all of the internal politics. When you add that all together, you actually realize they are doing a phenomenal job. So there's just so much behind the scenes when it comes to this industry that people don't know. So for me, it's always just about what works best for you and your brand in the most authentic way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So tell me about how in this freelance world, you're balancing learning, you're balancing delivering, you're balancing all of these things. How do you balance working ahead to ensure that you have future work when things start to get towards the end of their lifetime with projects?
It is a good question. And I suppose it's still fairly early on in my journey for me to really be able to succinctly answer that. I suppose it's by maintaining relationships with some businesses where they know that they are interested or they are appreciative of me offering maybe a little initial discovery call, and then just keeping them warm and thinking, 1 or 2 months ahead, could we look at that? Most of my work has actually just come via relationships with people that I've known in the past. So especially my agency roles, I went back to freelance for one of my previous agencies. As soon as they knew I was solo, they were like, we'd love to have you back. Come and join the dream team. Will help us out on these things. So it's about maintaining those networks and being open with people about what I'm doing. I will have some friends saying, I would love to work with you. Something, so I'm booked out for the rest of this month, but maybe in September, October time, we might be free. So it is still a little bit of work in progress. And I don't know what it will look like in December, January time, because that's when things are a little bit quieter. Then I've got February, I've got potentially stag do, and then March is the wedding. So we'll figure out, there's a lot of that to figure out. But I'd like to think I'm still early on in that process. Come back to me in a few months and we'll see.
I think the value of networking and not making it big and awkward and overwhelming. The word networking is so ugly, but just leaning into your network, just touching base with people, being like, how are you going? What's happening with you? Not necessarily selling and pitching. We have the connections already.
Exactly. I think your networking is an interesting thing because, like I'll get referrals from people I've not worked with or like properly like chatted to for 5 or 6 years, but it's just the trust and the connection is there. And you'd be surprised how many people are willing to help and offer that. And even other freelancers who I suppose in theory are competitors, but we want to help each other. There's enough work to go around. So if one of us is at capacity, we refer them. But then it's an interesting one you bring up networking, because one of the things I learned early on is you can get quite distracted by, here's a person I've connected with on LinkedIn. Let's meet up for a coffee or let's meet up for a beer or whatever. And it feels fine at first, but then let's say you set aside a day to do a particular amount of tasks. And you're like, okay, now I've got to go meet this person. I've got to get dressed up. I've got to I say do my hair, but I don't really have any of that. But get dressed, get the bus into town, this and that. And then suddenly you realize that one meeting that really is just a half-hour coffee has actually taken up 3 hours of your day. So when it comes to speculative networking like that, I always try and fit it at the end of the day, at the end of the week, when I know that I've done my to-do list, or I'll group a few of them together with another thing like a doctor's appointment, because that was something I found early on. This is positive. This is a good use of my time to go in and do this. And then suddenly I've realized that I've lost a lot of like actual working hours to travel and that sort of thing.
Yeah, you really come to value time in a very different way, I think, when you step outside of a corporate environment and go out on your own. I think there's a plugin now for some calendars where you can actually calculate the value. And this is for people working in a corporate environment. You can calculate the value of certain meetings. So if you have 10 people in a meeting room, then that meeting itself, if it goes for an hour, actually costs you like $3,000, which I think is brilliant because it starts to set that awareness. But when you're out on your own and you have that glass ceiling in a service-based business offering of my time is valuable and I either need to be using it for delivery, for marketing, prospecting, PR, learning, whatever it is, that value becomes so much higher and you really start to see that. So yeah, I think that's a lesson that takes a little while for us. I often get let's catch up for a coffee and I'm like, I really like you, but can we do it on Zoom? Because if I lose that time, that's 3 PR pitches I can't do in that time. So yeah, I think a lot of people that are out on their own will resonate with that. How do you think your business model will change as you grow and where do you hope to see it grow to?
When it comes to my goal for this business, it was simply to have a income comparable to what I was earning in a well-paid job at a PR agency, basically. That was my goal. It doesn't sound glamorous or anything like that. I don't have any desire to turn this into its own mini agency and hire people. I love working with people. I have people I collaborate with for different briefs. But we are doing this as solopreneurs teaming up rather than me hiring anyone. That goal will remain to just be a great consultant that's got a healthy work-life balance that can work with different kinds of businesses. So the only way I can see it changing is being able to charge a little bit more for a lot of the private work I'm doing and maybe doing it in, for example, a lot of the workshops that I look to do, it's very much one-on-one, but hopefully I can start working with larger businesses and larger teams and maybe work with 2 or 3 people and start hosting like more interactive workshops. Then I can charge a bit more, but knowing that each individual isn't paying as much. That's how I see it evolving. I think that is the goal when I look into the 6 months, 12 months down the line. There's been in the back of my mind, there's been trying to create and develop some courses. That is still something I'm thinking about, but I'm also just really enjoying the working directly with people right now. So I think it is just about maintaining the network, being able to hopefully start working with bigger businesses where I feel like I can charge a little bit more for my time.
Brilliant. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Once you start getting into creating something for yourself, no matter what the business model is, it starts to show itself to you what's possible and what feels right energetically. You can rationalize it and logically plan and map it on a path, but it shows you what it wants to be and how it wants to grow. And you just got to roll along for the journey sometimes and just get into it. So yeah, I think openness is a really wonderful way to think about all these things and then just let what comes. Like I said, I was so looking forward to hearing about this. I think freelancing is such a wonderful model. And I think we're seeing so many more people recognize their own skill set and recognize what they're capable of in a space and start to take a little bit more ownership of their work-life balance and their business balance and how they can get in there. So thank you so much for sharing all of this detail with me. My last question to you is, how can the listener and I support you to keep doing what you do and to keep growing?
Oh, wow. That would be follow me on the socials. Not that I'm hugely bothered about becoming an influencer or growing hundreds of thousands of followers. I didn't end up setting up an Instagram profile for my consulting. I just stuck with the same Instagram profile I always had. And again, it comes back to that authenticity. I share marketing tips. I share social media news and updates, as well as showing me going to watch hardcore punk bands around Sydney and going to watch Sydney FC or the World Cup or whatever it is, as well as like my cat doing hilarious things. Like my personal profile is as much my business profile because it comes back to that's what I want people to buy into. So I would say it is just engage with my content, share it with people. If you know anyone that wants a little bit of help with social media, whether that's creating content, whether that's giving them the tools and tips and advice to help them become autonomous at creating it themselves, and I can just come in as a bit of a coach for them. We want to work with micro influencers to promote our product or to change people's perceptions or educate people. That is essentially it. Just follow me, refer me to people so that I can keep doing what I'm doing. That was the main thing.
Brilliant. I will have the links to all of your socials and details in the show notes so that the listener can go get around you, learn a little bit more about what you do. Alex, thank you so much for spending this time with me today and sharing your story.
No worries. Thank you so much for having me.
One quick thing. If you're hearing this, you've listened all the way through. hopefully that means you really like this podcast because it's pretty generous to give up 40 odd minutes of your time for it. If that is the case, please leave the show a star rating and a review. It helps me reach so many more people who might also listen all the way through and get some benefit and some support out of it. Not to mention, it puts a real spring in my step to read them. Thank you for listening to Unemployed and Afraid, the podcast for small business builders with your host, me, Kim Curtin. If you love it, you can say thanks with a star rating and a review. And of course, join the community on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Find us at Unemployed and Afraid wherever you're hanging out, and I'll see you there.